Hi guys, today I'm joined with Sharon O'Neill. Sharon has a Bachelor of Social Work from the University of Tasmania. She is a Senior Pastor at Tailrace Community and she's the manager of the Tailrace Centre, Tailrace Cafe and Kids Paradise. Thank you for joining us, Sharon.
Oh, it's a real privilege to be here. Thank you, Matt. Love the work you guys do.
Thank you. So Sharon is here today to talk to us about some coping techniques that people can use at the moment during the pandemic of COVID-19. So can you start by telling us some of the things people might be facing at the moment because of this virus?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones is grief, because there's a lot of losses in there. So, you know, there's been loss of plans, there've been loss of celebration events. There can be loss in terms of relationships. Some have lost income, some might have lost hours, some might have lost, you might have partners or people in your world who have lost their place of employment. So there's just a lot of grief. So we need to acknowledge that grief and just recognise for what it is. I think the other thing that people are experiencing at the moment, particularly in the last week as I've done a lot of calls, is a loss of energy and vitality. So whilst people are being positive and resilient, there is this sense of feeling a little bit bluesy, and a lot of that's to do with the fact that we're people made for connections. So we're made for physical contact with one another, and we're not getting that. We're just not getting enough people contact. So it's kind of like, even though we're Zooming, it's kind of like a pseudo connection. This connection would be so much deeper and more real if you and I met, were having the conversation face to face. The energy, all that unspoken energy that happens between us, we would be sharing that with one another. So at the moment, if people are feeling bluesy, it's fairly normal, because that's what the isolation does. So it's quite hard. A third thing that I think that people would be experiencing at the moment is just that lack of control. So there's so many things outside of your control. So we were people who were created for control. We need control, otherwise we don't achieve anything. And so at the moment, some of those controls are gone. So it can be really, you can feel very disempowered, powerless. You can feel as though you just don't know what you can actually do and what you can't do. And then I think the last thing that's happening at the moment is that we were designed for competency. So we were designed for achievement. And for many people, whether it be your spouse, or whether it be your children, or whether it even be in your own work, there's so much uncertainty about the future. And so it can feel like I can't achieve anything. And so for people, there can be just this loss of, oh, who am I? Where's my identity? All that kind of stuff. So it's quite significant. What we're going through is what I would call a present trauma. So we've all heard of post-traumatic stress syndrome. What we're actually going through is present trauma on so many different levels. So it's quite complex.
Yes. So what can happen to us if we don't deal with that grief or sadness or trauma?
Yeah, so every time we experience grief, and grief is a normal process, and it's a healthy process for us to go through, and if we don't do it, it just sits there on the inside of us. And as a nation, we're not always good at dealing with what's on the inside of us. We like to deal with what's on the externals. We like to keep being busy. But if we don't deal with it, it just sits there. It's just there, and it pops up. It can pop up emotionally through anger. It can pop up through sadness. It can pop up through depression, anxiety. And a lot of the emotional stuff that we experience is simply unresolved sorrow. So it's our flight from sorrow. So sometimes we find it really hard to go into those deeper spaces and to acknowledge the feelings that we're feeling. But actually the healing actually comes through acknowledging what we're actually feeling. So it might simply be like, you know, I was supposed to celebrate my 18th birthday party. I couldn't have a party. We're all down in lockdown. Rather than minimizing it or ignoring it, just sort of saying, you know what, I feel really sad about that. That really, you know, I feel really sad that I missed out on that experience and the wonder of that. And often you'll find that by the time you've had a good cry, maybe you chatted to somebody about how you're feeling about that, it's resolved, it's done, it's dealt with. But as a people, we're very good at minimizing it. We kind of put on this bravado and this resilience thing of kind of going, oh, well, it's not too bad. There's somebody that's worse than me. There's somebody who's doing it tougher than me. Somebody who's, just finding life harder than me. So we minimize what we're feeling rather than acknowledging, you know what, that sadness was valid. It is sad that you couldn't celebrate your 18th birthday, or it is sad that you couldn't go to your grandparents' 80th birthday party, whatever it might be. And we've all got something, I think, in this season that we're all grieving. So I think it's important to acknowledge the grief. In relation to control, I think the issue of control, I think it's good to write a list of what you can and what you can't control. And so if you spend a good 10 minutes just writing down all your worries, all the things that just trouble you, both long-term and short-term, you write them all down. And then you, in doing that, you then write out one column of the things that you can't control, and then you write out a column of the things, okay, well, what can I control in the now? What can I do now? What can I actually do now? And then in relation to competency, I think that setting really short-term goals. So for example, Matt, with your cleaning staff, it might be, you know, they've got to do a deep clean, say at the university, or they've got to do a deep clean, I don't know, at Kids Paradise, whatever it might be. To set that as the goal and kind of go, okay, I can't set long-term goals, you know, for my house, for my kids, for holidays, for travel, but I can set a goal of making sure that I do this job the best that I possibly can. So we're setting those short-term goals, so then at the end of that shift, we can kind of look at it and kind of go, you know what, I did a really good job today. So you feel like you're achieving something. And then in relation to energy, I think we all have to be very proactive about over communicating. We have to communicate. So we have to pick up that phone and to talk to people. So they're just some ideas in there.
Yeah. Some other practical things I have heard over the week too is routines.
Yeah.
Stick into what routines you can,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to, you know, going to bed at a decent time, getting that sleep to have that energy to get through.
Yeah. That's really important, that those routines. Other things like, you know, limiting how much you listen to the news, how much you're on social media. Whilst it's good, it is pseudo connection. It's not going to be as powerful as, say, picking up the phone and actually having a conversation with someone. I also think practicing gratitude, like, you know, having a list of gratitude things where you practice being thankful for what you do have. I think that's really important at the moment. And I think the other one is, you know, some personalities imagine a lot. They imagine the worst case scenario. And I think it's really important to deal with reality and facts. My husband's better at this. He always goes, facts are your friend. He's so logical. But it's important, I think, in this season to be logical, to look at the facts.
Yeah, and another practical thing I heard recently too was respect. Show other people respect through this time. But also, as people are stressed and, you know, you tend to get more agitated, someone might bump into you in the supermarket, assume that they're respecting you too, and it was just something that happened. You know, someone cuts you off in traffic, assume it's just a result of their own stress, and assume they're respecting you so that you don't get worked up yourself.
Yeah. Well, they're all symptoms. When people behave badly like that, that's a symptom of them not dealing with what's happening on the inside. So when we don't deal with what's going on the inside, we either fight, and we saw that at the beginning of the pandemic in the supermarkets. I mean, that's people's reaction to grief, to the sorrow of what they're actually going through. So they then go and buy hundreds of toilet paper rolls and get aggressive in supermarkets. And we've seen some of that stop as people have started to deal with some of their feelings. So we either fight or we flight. So we saw some people go into very extreme lockdown measures very early. And some people are very extreme on that, and they're very protective and anxious. That's their way of coping with what's happening on the inside. And then other people freeze, where they just, I don't know what to do, I don't know what I can do. So they freeze. So they're the three normal responses we would have to what's happening on the inside. And that's why talking about what's happening on the inside is really, really important.
Yes. As some of the restrictions start to lift and we go back to whatever the new normal will be, are there some other things that we need to be concerned about that we will go through, other griefs, other coping techniques we need?
Yeah, so I think the big one for workplaces is that everybody's going to have a story, and multiple stories, because when we're grieving, one of the things that we need to do is to tell our story, and we tell it over and over and over again so that it makes sense in our mind, and it's a way in which we grieve and process the feelings. But can you imagine a workplace, say if you've got 100 people coming back, you're going to have 100 stories, and everybody's going to want to tell their story. Everybody's going to have a story about what happened to them during COVID, what they missed out on, or what made them sad, or what, and it'll come out in multiple ways. And I think that we have to create space for that and understanding for that, particularly in the workplace, because it's where a lot of those stories are going to happen, because work is where we congregate for large periods of our time, where we come together and we're with other people. Sporting groups will also experience it. Schools will also experience it. Anywhere where there are large gatherings of people, people are going to want to tell their story, and it's going to come out over a long period of time. And we have to understand that and give space to that, because people aren't going to be as productive until they tell their story. So I think the telling of the story is really, really important. And I also think it's really important for leaders and supervisors and bosses to sort of sit down and say, okay, how you doing? How was it for you? I think other things like celebrating in work environments, you know, having that celebration, marking that we've come through a tough time together, marking all the wins, celebrating people's achievements in that process, just hugging and being with one another. I think having meals together, I think all of that's going to be really vital. And I think it's an opportunity, because I think the one thing, well, I'm hoping that the one thing that we're going to really value is that human connection. I'm hoping as we come out of this that we'll have a deeper appreciation for each other, and that we'll just want to connect more. And so I'm hoping that that's what people will want to do more of when they come out of this, is to connect and to be real with one another.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon, for sharing those things, particularly those practical things that people can use. Just a reminder too to the Collings staff out there watching this, that we do have access to chaplaincy services for you through Tailrace Centre. So if you are struggling, if you need to just have a chat with someone that doesn't know you and doesn't know your story, you just want to share that story, then reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with Sharon or someone else that might be able to help you.
Yeah, I would love to have a chat. And then further down the track, I'd love to do a coffee with anyone. So always up for a time around the table. So, yeah. And yeah, I just want to encourage you guys. I know from our end, we've always loved using Collings, the cleaning services. And I know that you guys are working really hard and doing a lot of the hidden work. So from our end, thank you. Thank you for everything that you do for our community. We really value it. Really, really value it.
Yep. Thank you again, Sharon, for joining us today.
It's all right. Bye.
Bye.